All right, it looks like it's time to get started. Welcome everyone to the Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines webinar tonight. We're going to be covering all things legislative. My name is Tracy Fox, and I'm a pipeline fighter from Peoria, Illinois area, and one of the co-founders of Citizens Against Predatory Pipelines, fighting the Wolf Pipeline. I'm really pleased to introduce tonight Lisa Kerner from the Illinois Environmental Council, Pam Rickert from the Eco Justice Collaborative and the founder of the coalition, as well as Ann Baskerville from Sierra Club. So without further ado, I want to introduce Lisa Kerner, and I'm very excited to have the Governmental Affairs Director. Lisa considers herself a dual citizen of Chicago and Springfield. She's had about 10 years of experience working for different groups in the State House. And now she's joined Illinois Environmental Council, which has been behind so many big wins for health, for safety, and for the planet down in Springfield. Founded in 1975, a really great set of advocates that we're very fortunate to have on our side in this fight. And Lisa?
Hi, folks. My name is Lisa, and thank you for the introduction, Tracy. Tonight, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to operate in Springfield for those of you who are interested in getting involved with the General Assembly. You're coming up on a great time. Session gets started in just a couple months here, and we're closing up our veto session next week. So it's a great time to get involved, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about some tips that I've learned over my 10 or so years working down there. Okay, so just to give you let you know who I am. So I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Illinois Environmental Council. The IEC was started in 1975, working to safeguard Illinois' people, plants, and animals, and the natural systems on which all life depends. And we do this by building power for people in the environment. IEC represents over 100 environmental organizations. It grows every day. I think it was over 110 last time I looked, but we just keep it at over 100 because we do get new members all the time. IEC carries out its mission to advance public policies that create healthy environments across Illinois. So we do this through education, advocacy, and movement building. So IEC really works at all levels of government by bringing together our 100 plus members of the environmental community. And our main focus is on influencing decision makers. And we want to influence decision makers so that they make the right decision on clean air, clean water, and healthy communities. So we coordinate all of the affiliate member organizations to share resources, and down in Springfield, that's a great benefit that we're able to provide to legislators because just because we have such a breadth of different types of folks who are interested in everything from water to energy to conservation. And so we are kind of a central hub for people to be able to know that they can get a good broad environmental perspective. And this also allows us to respond quickly. So I don't have to research every question that I get asked by a legislator. I have this huge group of people that I'm able to reach out to get quick answers when the legislator moves really quickly. And we also, in this large member organization, build consensus. And we do this by putting together an annual legislative agenda. We put together a lobby day, and just do different things to bring all the environmental, all the people out there who care about the environment into the process, and in a way that we can best influence that process and the people who are making those decisions. So that's sort of the basics. And I apologize if this is sort of basic for folks, but I'm going to take like a high view of this. So who are we trying to add to influence when it comes to the CCS pipeline? So we are lobbying. It's not a bad word. The legislature, the General Assembly, the Illinois General Assembly. The Illinois General Assembly is made up of 118 members. 78 Democrats and 40 Republicans. I'm sorry, there's 118 House members. We have 78 Dems and 40 Republicans. It's a pretty big majority. It is a super majority, meaning that if we did not have J.B. Pritzker as our governor, or even if J.B. were to veto a bill, we have the Democrats have the numbers to override those vetoes. The Senate is made up of 59 senators, 40 Dems and 19 Republicans. Same story, a supermajority. Each each Senate district has 2 House districts nested within that Senate district. So each senator has 2 representatives, and their 2 representative district territories make up that Senate district. So let's talk about learning about your legislator. So to learn about your legislature, you can go to the ilga.gov website. I will say it's not the prettiest website, but I've done a lot of research in other states, and it is the most functional that I've seen by far. So it could use a little jazzing up, but it is very functional. And so you are able to go on and find your legislator. I think if you go to the Board of Elections, you can type in your address if you're not sure what district you're in, and it'll tell you what district you're in and who your legislature is. So then you're going to go to the ILGA website, and you can find your member there. On this, you can find their contact information. A really important thing is to find their committee assignments, so you can know if they get a chance to vote on a bill before it makes it to the floor, and ask questions of the people who testify in committee. They're going to have a closer relationship to any piece of legislation that goes through their committee. So we often, when we're thinking about who we want to target to talk to, think about the committees that they serve on. And if they serve on, for example, the environmental committee, sometimes the executive committee is another, sometimes bills that are environmentally based, but they're huge bills, like something like CCS may end up going through the executive committee, so that leadership can keep a little bit of a tighter hold on it. And I will say this about learning about your legislator. So one thing that we always recommend advocates to do, and one thing that's great about having advocates from all over the state, and having a lot of advocates, is legislators really want to hear from their constituents. They will listen to constituents from other districts, but if you are able to introduce yourself to a legislator and say, you are my senator or you are my representative, the amount of attention and care that they are going to give that conversation is really just so above what you're going to hear from just sort of somebody who's just talking to every single legislator that they possibly can. So always good to start with your own representative and senator. So let's talk a little bit about the process of how bills move through the General Assembly. What happens first is a bill is introduced in the first chamber. It is read in for the first reading. So there are some constitutional requirements that come with passing bills in Illinois. And one of those is the number of readings and the number of days that that bill has to be on those readings. So sometimes you'll hear people at the end of session start talking about, well, there's only so much time and it needs to go through this and this reading. They're talking about all these constitutional requirements. And I will talk a little bit about deadlines in a minute. And deadlines are extremely important, especially if they're your bill. You want to meet all your deadlines, but I would caution against getting too comfortable with deadlines, because there's always ways around them. So anyways, back to the process. So the bill is introduced in the first chamber, so either the House or the Senate. Some people choose to introduce the same bill in both chambers, just give it a shot, see which one moves. It then goes into a committee. So that it'll be read in first reading, and it will go to either the Committee on Rules or the Committee on Assignments, and their leadership will make a decision on where that bill goes. If it's a criminal law bill, it goes to the Criminal Law Committee. Enviro bills go there. Some bills go to exec, and then they are sent to what is called a substantive committee. Once in the substantive committee, that is a great chance for folks to get involved because there is the opportunity to give committee testimony. So the committee section is actually my favorite part of the process, because I like testifying in front of committees. I like answering questions. And so there, the representative presents the bill. Oftentimes the advocates sit up at the table with the representative, and even though the representative or the senator is getting asked questions by their colleagues who are on the committee, oftentimes they will want you to answer if you're the subject matter expert, or you've got a story, an impactful story about how this would affect your life. It's a chance for the general public to really have this like really deep involvement in the process. So I love the committee stage. It then goes into a second reading, which is kind of enough. That's just one of the constitutional things. Nothing happens on that. So sorry. So if it passes out of committee, it goes into second reading. It is then put onto third reading. On third reading is when the representatives and senators debate the bill, ask questions about the bill, and go back and forth. Sometimes I'm watching up in the balcony seats. Sometimes I'm watching online. And then it, either passes or fails. If it passes, it goes into the second chamber and it goes through the same process. It's going to go through the committee on either rules or assignments. It's going to get assigned to a substantive committee. It's going to get a hearing, hopefully, although sometimes you do have to pressure your bill to get a hearing in committee. Then it goes onto the floor again for debate in the other chamber. If the bill does not change from the time it is introduced and passed in the first chamber and then passed in let me say this a little bit simpler. If the bill is not amended in the second chamber and the second chamber votes on the bill to pass it, it passes. If the second chamber amends the bill, it has to go back to the first chamber so that they can vote on a concurrence, where they will approve the changes made by the other chamber or not. So that is how it works. This is a little bit more detailed version of the process. And obviously, once it is past both chambers, it will go to the governor to be signed, hopefully. So I was talking a little bit about deadlines, and like I said, deadlines are important, but there's often ways around them depending on the depending on a lot of things, depending on whether leadership is involved, depending on how pressing the issue is. These deadlines can be gotten around, but I never expect to get around a deadline, but I always expect my opponents to be able to get around a deadline. So I'm never resting when it's, a deadline is passed and I think, oh, phew, that bill's dead now. So this is a calendar from last year. We won't see the calendar. Hopefully we'll see it soon. I'm dying for this calendar to come out. It's really kind of rules my life. So it'll hopefully come out in the next couple of days. But if you want to take a look at this is sort of a general type of when things happen. So you're going to have in late January, early February, you will have the Legislative Research Bureau, which takes your drafts of a bill and turns them into something that is actually you can file. And the LRB has deadlines, and these deadlines aren't always posted on the calendars. These are deadlines that you're going to have to call to find out about. Then there's an introduction deadline in mid-February. Then there's a deadline for bills to pass out of committee. And then there's a deadline for bills to pass out of the chamber of origin. So, and those, you can see kind of where about that falls. Last year, they theoretically were going to adjourn on May 19th. They adjourned on May 24th. In prior years before COVID, it was always on May 31st. May 31st is like the biggest day of the year. It usually goes until 4 a.m. This year, I expect it will be different as well, because it's an election year. So this is just kind of a general expectation of between late January and mid to late May, what you can expect, how you can expect a bill to need to be moving through the process so that you can tell if it's on track or not. And the calendars are online. I'm going to show you the front page of their website on the next slide. Calendars are online, and it's great. They're lovely calendars, and I put them all over my house, my office, and anywhere I can keep them. So like I said, the website is not the prettiest, but it is a really great website. So the search functions are really great. Up here on that left column is how you would search for a bill. I showed you a little bit earlier about looking into your senators and your House members. Obviously, you see those member tabs there. If you are looking for a previous bill, you would use the previous General Assembly, and then you'll get these same search functions once you go to previous General Assemblies. And there's also places for you to do some search terms, but I wouldn't recommend it. There is also, I will tell you, it's not on here, but there is also ways to see audio and video. You'll see there audio, video. So if you're interested in watching session, House or Senate, the committees are sometimes on video, always on audio, and the floor is always on video. So in case you want to watch there. So once you search in, go back. Once you put your bill number that you want, and then you're going to search in those boxes, it is going to pull up the bill. You'll see the sponsor. You'll see what has happened to it. You'll see up here on the full text, the text of the bill. It'll also have the text of any amendments. And so this is the first page. So here, we picked the bill FEJA. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's the future energy. I actually don't forget what it stands for. To go through. So so I showed you. So you can click full text up here, and then down here you're going to see the actions. So this bill, in the first slide, nothing's really happened to it, but I'm going to show you what happens when a bill really goes through the ringer. So here you're going to see all the different co-sponsors, and I want to just stop for a moment and talk about co-sponsors. Co-sponsors are, they can be a really important part of any strategy. One thing about co-sponsors is the chief co-sponsors, when the bill is voted on, their names go up on the board. And so they also actually have the authority to amend the bill and present the bill. They would never really do that without the sponsor's permission. But, in terms of like their ownership of the bill, they tend to feel a lot of ownership of it if they're good co-sponsors. So you have a chief co-sponsor that is indicated by this, that is indicated by this dash here, and then anyone with a comma is just your regular old co-sponsor. But yeah, getting co-sponsors is great. Theoretically that means they're voting for your bill. And it's an important way to show the amount of support that you've garnered, because people will see this list and be impressed. I will say, in terms of picking your chief co-sponsors and the people who are listed up at the top, it's great to get a diverse set of lawmakers, whether, a diversity of race and gender, a diversity of area of the state. If you can get a diversity of party, that's even better. So it's important to think about those co-sponsors as demonstrating a coalition of support for your bill. Now, here's what happened with the bill. Okay, so we're going to just look at it and see. So it goes through rules, it gets assigned to the committee, it gets voted out of committee, it goes on to second reading. Well, it made it out of committee, but someone had something they needed to change about it, so they amended it. Then that amendment needs to go through the same rules process that the initial bill does. So it needs to go through that vetting committee. And then that amendment has to be heard by the committee. So the bill basically gets heard again. And then we're going to go through committee again. It's going to be adopted. And then we're going to go to third reading, where the bill is passed. So it's going to now go over to the Senate. It's going to pick up its Senate sponsor. It's going to pick up some co-sponsors, alternate co-sponsors. So we're picking up some people here. It is getting assigned out to committee, getting voted on, getting amended again in the second chamber, which means it's going to pass out of the second chamber. And then we're going to pick up some more co-sponsors, and then it's going to go back to the first chamber for concurrence. So here we have it going back from the Senate, passing the Senate, and then it's going back to the House to get approved. And then it finally passes the House and then becomes a public act when it is signed by the governor. Yay, the bill passed. Great job, everyone. I'm going to talk briefly. I think I'm getting close to time. I'm going to talk briefly about the best ways to get involved. And so there are a number of ways to get involved. I think folks have different levels of comfort in terms of how involved they want to be. On a lower level, you can do something like file a witness slip, which is just to put your name in and have that, be read into the record. So I will say about witness slips, it's fine to file one. They are not always read out in committee. Sometimes they are if folks are with an organization. So if you represent, let's say, even a smaller organization, like let's say you even represent 10 people or something like that, then, definitely putting in a witness slip that may be read in committee. Sometimes in committee, though, they're only going to read the big players that everyone is curious, where's that organization or association at? But it can be powerful when someone says there are 726 opponents to this bill, even if they're just representing themselves, and they won't read all the names, but that makes a difference. Testifying in committee is a big one. Not everyone's comfortable testifying. And I think for particular bills, you don't want to, you're not going to want to have hours and hours of testimony, but, determining who's going to testify. And if you are asked to testify, you'll hopefully be well prepared by the folks who are leading the effort. But yeah, it can be powerful if you feel like you have subject matter knowledge, but also it can be powerful to just talk about personal stories. And I know that for the folks on this call with CCS, one thing that Pam has kind of talked to me about is just sort of the deja vu effect of just another pipeline permit request being filed, and then we argue about it and it gets pulled and it's filed again, and you're just kind of always in this really pattern where you feel like you don't have a lot of say in what is going to happen. And at the committee stage, you get some say in what's going to happen, and you can sort of talk about what that might mean for your, what it has meant to you in the past, and what you're scared of in the future, and what you want to see from your legislators, and how you want them to act, and what you want them to do. So it's a really, it can be really powerful. Grassroots lobbying is another way that you all are probably, I think for a lot of the folks on this call, I don't need to tell you guys about this because you guys have shown up in huge numbers. And so honestly, I would probably, I don't know if I should really be teaching you guys about this, because you guys could probably teach me a thing or two about just the huge efforts and the huge numbers that you guys have gotten out there. So, showing numbers, the lobby days are good for grassroots lobbying. On a lobby day, again, you want to go visit your representative, or have all the people who are out there, go find your representative, can be a good way to do it. And then like me, you have registered lobbyists. I am technically a lobbyist. Some lobbyists have a bunch of different clients. I only work for IEC. And, some people have every client under the sun, from gaming to soda to pipelines. Those are registered lobbyists, and they will be around, and they will know how the building works. The folks who are working on y'all's side with CCS, those are the good guys, and they can be very helpful in sort of giving you advice about who to talk to and what kinds of things that person might resonate with that particular person. And you can do a little bit of your own research too about legislators and figure out, what's gonna, strike this person or not. So again, you guys are organizers. So you have organizers around. So I won't talk too much about that. I'll talk quickly about how to file a witness slip. To file a witness slip, you're going to go and you're going to click into the committee, and then you're going to go into over on GA dashboard. And so here you're going to find, so here's your executive committee. Oops, executive committee has been canceled. All right, here, let me just pretend that it has been canceled. Oh, goodness. There's going to be over here, there's going to be two little icons. Let me see if I've got this on a later slide. So this will be today's committee hearings. So you're going to click into any of these committees. You can click in here or here and view hearing details. It's going to tell you what bills, it's going to tell you what bills are there. So here you're going to find your committee. You're going to go from the schedule, find your committee. Oh, here we go. Here are my icons. And then you're going to go to create a witness slip here. You can also view witness slips here in case you want to see who else is slipped in support. You're just going to fill out this form. So you start at GA dashboard, you're going to go to the schedule, you're going to click on the committee and view the committee details, and then you're going to choose create a witness slip. You're going to choose your position, and then you're going to pick record of appearance only unless you are testifying. As I alluded to earlier, witness slips are a great thing to do. And if you're not in Springfield and you don't have a lot of time on your hands, go for it. But there are more powerful ways to contact to make an impact. So if you're going to testify in committee, make sure you fill out a witness slip, and you need to choose oral for your testimony. You also need to speak with the committee chair and the your bill sponsor. If you tell your bill sponsor, there will also be a committee chair, and that committee chair will have a staff person who is typically their legislative assistant who works in their office and then staffs their committee when it's committee time. They will be kind of milling about asking, oh, do you plan to testify? And you'll go ahead and testify. Keep your testimony short, unlike how I'm doing with the presentation, in which I am over my time. Best tips in advocacy: be polite, be understanding and patient, say thank you. Be super nice to the staff. The staff they're great. They're super stressed during session. And honestly, they can get you a lot of information if you befriend them. Be brief. They're getting a million of these folks a day. So be brief. This is part I have a problem with. Make an ask and let them answer. Sit in that uncomfortable silence. It's totally okay if you don't know the answer to something. I also would avoid telling the lawmaker they have the answer wrong. I think you want to just talk about why it's important to you as a constituent. So this is from a congressional research study in terms of how effective different methods of lobbying and organizing are. And so obviously we see in-person visits being at the top, and then sort of these form emails sort of down at the bottom. Again, they do make a difference, especially when they come in droves and there's hundreds of them. Lawmakers have referenced that in committee and said, I want to vote for this bill, but my constituents are telling me absolutely not. So you can see that obviously this individual contact and individualized messages really go a long way. So lobbyists are just advocates. We just have to register. We've got your do-gooders who you all will hopefully be working with. And lobbyists they know who to talk to. They have great relationships with people. This is their job. These are basically their coworkers, their colleagues. And so, a lot of lobbyists help give information to lawmakers, so they're helpful for that as well. All right, I'm almost done here, I promise. So I probably am going to just speed through the rest of this. There's a lot of reasons to build relationships with elected officials. And you can help them by teaching them. You can help them by showing that they're responsible to their community, and they can help you obviously by voting the way that you hope they do, and also by spreading the word that you hope to spread. So the best outcome is a legislator who agrees with you and who wants to tell other legislators what you told them. I think that'll pretty much close me out. So thank you all for listening.
If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I know someone had asked in the Q&A about the difference between witness by appearance and the other types. So you might start with that one.
Sure. There's three types of witnesses. You can file a written statement, which I have never done actually before. Otherwise, a record of appearance only will just have your name will be part of a sheet. And at the beginning of committee, they'll say, before the bill is read, they'll say, for the record, this bill has 726 proponents, 30 opponents. The opponents are, they'll list a couple big organizations. And then if they're just individuals, just kind of leave them by name. And then oral is if you're going to be giving testimony in committee. And written statements, I think, are usually reserved for like experts who aren't able to testify. They have to stay neutral for some sort of like conflict of interest type reason. So I've never done that one before.
Okay, great. Any other questions, folks? If not, I've got one that'll kind of set the stage for what you and Pam have been working on. Could you kind of explain how bills are sometimes pre-negotiated?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And a little bit of the process there, because I think that'll set Pam up nicely.
No, that's a great question, Tracy. Thank you for that. Yeah, so, bills are negotiated in different ways. And sometimes for a smaller bill, we file a bill and we kind of see what comes up. We kind of see who comes out of the woodwork, and we see who opposes us, and we kind of negotiate throughout the session. With something as monumental and like complicated as carbon capture sequestration, this thing has been being talked about for, I don't know, Pam, how long now? It's been a long time. And so in this case, we've got, dozens of people on both sides going back and forth about the bill. And in this case, hopefully whatever is filed has been vetted and people have weighed in. Nobody's caught off guard or surprised. And so while there may be amendments clearing up technical things, it's what we call a negotiated bill process. So I wouldn't call CCS a negotiated bill because that would be too lovely for us. But yeah, this has been a heavily negotiated bill with hours and hours of back and forth, tons of stakeholders. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for
Thanks,
that.
Tracy.
And for kind of kicking things off for us. Our next speaker, I think probably all of you know, Pam Rickert from Eco Justice Collaborative and founder of our coalition. Pam is going to start off with the long-term view and talk a little bit about the long-term legislative wins that we want. And then after that is concluded, she's going to go into what we're planning to do in the interim to make sure that we get to that long-term view without a bunch of pipelines in the meantime. So
thank you, Tracy. That's my plan anyway. So welcome everybody. And we're really glad that you're here with us. And Lisa, thank you for giving us a ton of information. And I think if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those slides, there were a few that I think we could pass along as part of this webinar that would be worth people's time to review. That would be great. So I am going to spend the next, and it's probably going to be 25 minutes with you talking about this carbon capture and storage bill that we have been working on, as Lisa said, for quite some time. And I will say that it did not make it into veto session. We just haven't had the kind of negotiations and stakeholder meetings that would have allowed us to proceed with that super majority vote that would be required in a concentrated amount of time. So we're still going to be working on it, and I expect we will have something into the Legislative Review Bureau, which is where bills go, before probably January, early February. So stay tuned for that. And I'm also going to talk about the interim bill that we're looking at as well, that I think has a lot of teeth. I'll be talking about a moratorium as we go through these as I go through these slides. So let me begin and just say I'm going to cover all three processes. I think most folks here understand that carbon capture and storage is, and I think this is important to say, it's a process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide before it is released into the atmosphere. It does not take anything out of the atmosphere that's there already. So when we talk about this as a climate solution, we have to remember what we're really doing is preventing things from getting worse if we use this technology. We're not taking CO2 that's already in the atmosphere out. So I think that's an important point. And once the CO2 is captured, it's compressed into a liquid, it's transported by pipeline. Many of you on this call are working on that pipeline piece. And then it is either buried underground, as we're seeing currently with the pipelines that are here trying to get a foot in Illinois, or it can be used for something else. And historically, CCS has been used for enhanced oil recovery. It can be used to get that last bit of oil out of the ground that you can't get with standard drilling practices. But then when you burn the oil, of course, you're releasing more emissions into the atmosphere. And so it's really not a climate solution. And I just wanted to point that out. So until recently, carbon capture for sequestration was not profitable. And then something happened a year ago, August, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a whole host of money set aside for all kinds of things, in addition to CCS, was passed. And if you remember, there was a lot of back and forth, primarily with Joe Manchin, who is pretty adamant about getting what he wanted in this bill, and the 45Q tax credit, which is driving much of the incentives here for CCS in Illinois and across the country. That value was increased by 70%. So now we're looking at $85 a ton for CCS if it's stored. You may know that Illinois' geology has made it a primary target for storage. We're not the only place in this country who has this kind of saline aquifer that makes us unique, but we're among those who do, and folks are interested in coming here. We know that there are major users. We've talked a lot about ethanol as we talk about pipelines, but it's appropriate to note as well, we've got the biggest coal plant here in Illinois, Prairie State, that's looking to do carbon capture and storage as a potential lifeline so it can continue to operate its coal plant. That plant also is the 7th largest emitter of carbon in the country. So they think they're making a good case for it. And we're going to unpack some of the reasons to why that statement and that push for CCS might not be so good for them. And then the corn growers in the Illinois Farm Bureau are looking at CCS as an opportunity to continue the ethanol with an eye towards using that product, ethanol, as a sustainable aviation fuel. So there's a lot going on in here that makes Illinois that target. But CCS for coal plants, fossil fuel plants, has been a dismal failure over the years. Folks will tell you it's been around for a while. Well, it has been. But if you can look at just this list, you can see we've had canceled projects, they've been withdrawn, they've been shuttered, etc. I would bet most everyone from Illinois on this list remembers Future Gen, which started in the George Bush era and was not canceled until 2015 after cost overruns, technical problems, schedule problems as well, and $1 billion or more was spent. So that's our plant that didn't get built here. And the only one that's operating today in North America, the coal plant, is Canada's Boundary Dam project. But they're operating at far less the capacity than planned. So key concerns: it's not been effective at reducing carbon emissions, and there are not adequate performance standards at the federal level to ensure CCS is effective as a climate strategy. That's a really big concern, as is extending the life of heavily polluting facilities that, especially if it's like a coal plant, we've got many coal plants in Illinois that are located in environmental justice communities, and they would bear the brunt of increased pollution because as you add carbon capture equipment, you need more energy. You either build a new plant or you run it harder and longer. So at any rate, CCS also requires an immense amount of water, especially at power plants. We calculated that to do carbon capture on the Prairie State Coal Plant would use an annual equivalent of water equal to that which is provided as drinking water to the residents of Ann Arbor. So that puts it into context. It's a huge amount of water. And then, of course, CCS investments divert resources away from renewables at a time when we need to be keeping fossil fuels in the ground. So what are the guardrails for carbon capture in our bill? Well, one of the things that we're sticking to is the fact that the efficiency rate of 90%, which is what industry has said they can do, and so do the technical experts say they can capture carbon at a 90% efficiency rate. We want to see them do that to ensure that the carbon capture projects are in fact effective climate strategies. We're looking at a life cycle analysis that will take into account upstream and downstream emissions. So you're not just looking at what you're capturing, but what does it take to build that capture equipment? What does it take to, decommission the system at the end? We want to make sure that the project is net carbon negative and actually is a carbon solution. And then we want to look at alternatives. Alternatives, what could you do to achieve those same reductions that might cause less harm, that might cause less money, that might be able to be more efficient and work in a way that is bringing things online more quickly. So then the other piece that I think is important in this bill, we want to be sure that carbon capture facilities are not allowed to increase those dangerous air pollution emissions like sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and ozone. Those health-harming pollutions should not be allowed to increase. And we've learned by, again, talking both with industry and with other experts that is possible with best available practices. Water protections, we want to make sure if you're going to use that water, we're going to analyze what it means, quantity, quality, and that there are limits on water usage in times of shortage. And then lastly, a robust public engagement. That's something you'll hear all through the talk here. Public engagement is really super key and important, but particularly for the environmental justice communities most likely to be affected. So now I'm going to move on to pipelines and the carbon transport via pipeline. That's that second piece of the chain, right? So here in Illinois, we're looking at 3 projects. Navigator CO2 Ventures, which entered officially the first time around in July of 2022, came back after they withdrew in February of 23-24, and they filed their application with the ICC at both those dates. Will Carbon Solutions came later. They filed in June of this past year with the Illinois Commerce Commission, and One Earth Sequestration just filed all of, I can't do math. So they filed on October 18th. So the Illinois Commerce Commission is the state entity that reviews and will ultimately issue a certificate authority to grant a pipeline developer to build its pipeline in Illinois. Now, Navigator, as most on this call know, had some troubles. They didn't have trouble just here in Illinois, but they were denied twice. Recommended for denial, rather, I should say. They never got all the way through to be denied. But they were denied in South Dakota. They've had trouble in Iowa, and they decided to pull their projects, so they've been canceled. Wolf Carbon Solutions just recently experienced their first recommendation of denial by ICC staff. They seem to be following in the footsteps of Navigator, making those same errors, and the arguments about safety and routing are quite similar. So we'll see what they do with their recommendation of denial. And then One Earth Sequestration LLC has not yet, to my knowledge anyway, had their schedule set. So they're brand new in the process. But we also need to be looking here in Illinois about hydrogen, because we have been selected or agreed to be part of the Midwest Alliance for hydrogen, for clean hydrogen rather. But this does include blue hydrogen, and blue hydrogen, which is made from natural gas, does end up with CO2 as a byproduct, and CO2 then will be captured, and it will be piped, and it will be stored underground. So this is another source of CO2 pipelines that we're looking at here. So now, why are we concerned about CO2? What the heck is the problem? We all know we breathe it. We all know that it's in a lot of the products that we use. So what's the problem? I'm going to spend 90 seconds showing you this partial video showing you what the problem is.
This video shows a rupture of a buried, dense phase carbon dioxide pipeline. The experiment was conducted in the safe environment of the DNVGL Spade Adam Testing and Research Centre to assess the consequences of such ruptures in terms of mass outflow, crater formation and dense gas dispersion. The viewer should note that the extent of the visible plume does not necessarily represent the extent of the dense gas hazard.
So that's when, if you all were off mute, I would say, let me know what you think about whether or not that's the same thing as a fizz in your soda. That was a pretty violent rupture, and we know that it's possible that even though that was a test demonstration, we know that it's possible that could happen along any of the pipeline routes that are being proposed in this country, because it did happen in Satartia, Mississippi. I think most probably know about this, but it doesn't hurt to remind all that the pipeline was in fact stressed by soil movement after days of heavy rain. The explosion created a 40-foot deep crater. The CO2 plume release lasted 4 hours and traveled over a mile into the town of Satartia. And I want to remind you as well that CO2 does displace oxygen, hugs the ground. People in its path can become intoxicated, as they did, and convulse, as they did in Satartia. And as you have read, 200 people were evacuated by first responders, many of them on foot because vehicles wouldn't run. Internal combustion engines require oxygen to fully operate. And we had many who were hospitalized and some with long-term health effects. So what we know is CO2 is a pretty serious gas to be dealing with, and it does in fact have some significant health impacts we need to be thinking about as we look at setting limits for a bill. It is immediately dangerous to life and health once it reaches the 40,000 parts per million, and it can lead to death as it reaches 7 to 10%. 10% or more can cause death within minutes. So after this accident happened, PHMSA did announce it was doing rulemaking to improve safety, which is really a really interesting thing, because I think the fact that they did their investigation report and immediately followed that with rulemaking was a pretty important acknowledgement that they thought they had to act. But here we have the problem, because pipeline developers are moving forward now before those regulations are in fact in place. And there's a whole host of things that PHMSA is looking at that can be done to address some of the key problems of CO2 pipelines that lead to leaks, that lead to ruptures, that lead to unzipping of the pipe and exposing long lengths of CO2. But nobody's waiting. And I think that's a problem, and we're talking about that as we do the stakeholder meetings in the pre-negotiation of the bill process. And they're also conducting research to improve modeling. And good modeling is important for emergency response, and it's equally important to have it for establishing safe setbacks. And that modeling does exist. There is precise modeling that exists that can help us do this now. But PHMSA is looking at that as well. So the technology exists. We have acknowledged, thanks to Paul Blackburn, who came to one of our stakeholder meetings with us. He point blankly, if that's a word, looked at the governor's staff and those in the room and says, nobody's done this. You've got to be the ones to do this. Don't let the developers set the criteria for routing. Somebody has to be evaluating how the concentrations of CO2, the length of exposure, the ability to get people out, the ability to rescue people all work together. And that's the state's job. So, and that standard setting is going to require participation of all kinds of experts that are listed here. And most importantly, it needs to be made transparent, and it needs to have public input. Those of us on this call who are working with CO2 pipelines know that the developers want to keep their information confidential and proprietary. They don't want to share what they're doing. And if they felt that we would all think that they were safe if we saw it, I would think they would be showing it to us, but they're not. Moving on here, almost done with pipelines. There are other impacts that the bill will talk about, in particular, eminent domain. Eminent domain is not something that Illinois well regulates. There's no criteria or standards here. And I think that's not unusual, although Minnesota has said no eminent domain can be used for CO2 pipelines. Our bill currently says that as well. We may move on it, but right now we're starting out with all those easements have to be agreed to before a CO2 pipeline can be built. Farmers are really keen on this. They want to protect their property. They want to protect their property value. They want to protect their families. So that's something that I know is going to be talked about as we move forward. And then, of course, we know that the national build out that's being planned to achieve net zero over the next several years by 2050 is to build this massive network of CO2 pipelines across the Midwest, much of it coming into Illinois. In fact, the Department of Energy has said there could be as many as 96,000 miles if pipelines are sized as they're being considered today. Not the 48-inch diameter that is shown on this graphic, but in smaller segments. So, and major hubs are going to be in Illinois. So what are the guardrails here? So the first thing we're talking about is creating a moratorium on CO2 pipelines until PHMSA completes its rulemaking. That's not all we're doing, but for pipelines, that's where we're starting. And I'll get to what else we're doing at the end. We want those geohazards to be analyzed so that we are really convinced that a pipeline is not going to be routed through soils that are not suitable and would be subjected to subsidence, or here in our case, all of the mined areas that exist from the 1890s and the early 1900s that were built with room and pillar supports. The roof supports and the pillars are made of wood, and they're sinking all over the state. So we want to make sure we have that geohazard analysis strong. Our communities can't afford the grants that the equipment that they need to be prepared for a pipeline rupture. They don't have the funds available for electric vehicles or air supply respirators, for example. We need to make sure we're funding the kind of training that needs to be provided for everybody, for businesses, for residents, for first responders, for local governments, etc. We want to limit the use of eminent domain. We want to make sure we do the work required to establish those safe setbacks and create those thresholds of acceptable exposure levels that will protect people and allow self-rescue or rescue. And again, all of this needs to be done in a really robust public engagement process. And we're recommending they do a lot of this work, almost all this work, up front before they file their application with the ICC, because here in Illinois, we have an 11-month-long process. So the last section, key concerns over carbon sequestration. This graphic is from the US EPA, and it does show the various pathways that sequestered CO2 can leak. It's supercritical CO2 is made supercritical again as it is injected underground, and it's more buoyant than the surrounding liquids. It can escape. It can escape along injection wells, abandoned wells, especially oil and gas wells that are abandoned, or through fractures in the caprock or the seal. And if it does so, and it makes contact with water, CO2 and water form carbonic acid, that releases all the toxic metals from the rocks that are in that aquifer, and it contaminates our drinking water. It also can stunt crop growth, making if it makes it to the surface, the root masses are not as full, and their roots are not as long. So that can reduce yield. And of course, if it escapes back into the atmosphere, what the heck have we done to begin with? Abandoned wells, major source of leaking. I think I just want to point out on this slide here that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources says they do not know where all the abandoned wells are. They have shown that there are about 4,000 of them, but they do believe that there are a lot more, and we don't know where they all are. And even the plugged wells are at risk because they can provide the pathway to escape containment, especially if they are eroding the cement that's been used to plug them. And there is an example of where an old well released CO2 by a school in Wyoming in 2016, and the school had to shut down. Everybody was evacuated before it shut down for months. So this is not something that should be taken lightly. Similarly, we know the geology here, which everyone says is great. Well, I've got the geology is leaking. The geology is not leaking. The storage is leaking. I better fix that slide. The storage area is leaking. The CO2 is leaking. We learned yesterday in conversations with a geologist that he has a report that says the CO2 stored at ADM in Decatur, 6,000 feet underground, has already moved 1,000 feet since 2013. And that they knew it was moving as early as 2016. So we're going to be looking at that a whole lot more closely. The report is on its way to me, and you can look for more. So right now, just know that this is a secondary source of information, but he has the report, had it with him, and I feel confident that what he shared is accurate. And we also know that underground natural gas storage has happened in our state. Here are 3 examples, and they're not insignificant. In the Ancona and Troy Grove experiences, The methane moved above the cap rock, despite all the studies that were done to make sure that the fissures and cracks, etc., were not going to be a problem. It still did it. And then many of us know about the Manlove gas field in Champaign County, where the leaks were taking place under the Mahomet Aquifer, which is a EPA sole source designated aquifer, which means water replacement is really difficult and not easy to find. And this particular aquifer does in fact serve nearly 1 million people in central Illinois. And I talk about the CCS projects in this slide because I just want everybody to recognize that we have to act and we have to get legislation across the finish line, and we're going to need you all to do it. Here, highlighted in yellow, are all of the applications for Class 6 wells, the injection wells that will be used for a carbon storage project. So it's happening. These are projects in process being reviewed today by the US EPA. So we need to be working diligently on this. And similarly, many of those projects, Navigator CO2 Ventures is still holding, coming to meetings that are being held in McLean County. They are not giving up their sequestration. They are fighting for it and trying to get approval for it by McLean County, but it also would be under the Mahomet Aquifer in Logan and DeWitt and Tazewell County as well. All major concerns. And then on the upper right there, or towards the center right, that would be One Earth Sequestration LLC, and they are proposing to store their carbon below the recharge area, one of the recharge areas of the Mahomet Aquifer, which is just as bad. So we have our work cut out to do here on sequestration in addition to pipelines. And then there's earthquakes. Increased pressure can induce earthquakes. We all know that Illinois has experienced major earthquakes in the past. We've had them as recently as 2008 and 2012. They were felt all the way to Chicago. So this is a concern as well. And then some key questions that are remain unanswered that have to be addressed in this bill. Who owns the pore space into which carbon dioxide is injected? That's not clear here in Illinois. Who owns the carbon dioxide after it's been injected? That's not clear either. Who should be responsible for ensuring carbon dioxide stays deep underground or addressing a leak or well blowout if they occur? These are things that we really have to take action on and include in our bill. And so the guardrails here that we're considering, and these are not all of them, but they're sample for each of the three parts of the system here. We do want to make sure that we designate the surface owner of the estate as the owner of the pore space, and we limit the number of properties that must be acquired through what we call in our bill amalgamation or unitization, which is essentially the assembly of pore space. It functions pretty much like eminent domain. And so the industry folks are proposing we keep that at about 71%. And we're saying, no, that's much too low. So we're proposing at this point, our bill says everybody has to agree. Will there need to be some movement? Yes, but we're not going to go as low as 71%. We also want to make sure that the EPA Class 6 well regulations are the minimum threshold for a permit. The state of Illinois has the ability to be stronger, and we are stronger in many instances, including the monitoring time. And we want to make sure that we have additional monitoring that goes above and beyond that required by Class 6 well regs, so that we continue to monitor that soil gas, that air, in addition to the other things that are required. And all the things here, I think, are self-explanatory. But the one I think that is different that I want to highlight is we don't want to have a sequestration injection well intersecting with a potable water aquifer like the Mahomet or others that are providing a major source of drinking water. And of course, we have to make sure that we are looking at those abandoned wells and the mine shafts and the quarries and other things that could serve as escape paths. And finally, the almost finally one, we believe the developer should be responsible and held liable for CO2 releases and post-closure care. In the industry bill that's been proposed, that the industry wants to turn that function over to the state. And then again, we want that robust public involvement throughout. So what are we doing in next steps? Well, our discussions have come to a halt as veto session has been ongoing. We hope they'll pick up again, but we know we're coming into the holidays. We hope we'll pick up again soon on the sequestration bill. But in the meantime, we are drafting a moratorium on CO2 pipelines and sequestration, and that will be tied to the completion of PHMSA rulemaking, adoption of a comprehensive protective CCS bill that we're working on the language for to make sure we don't just get any CCS bill, we get the kind of bill we need here in Illinois that's protective, and we'll be tying that to a timeline. So this will not be considered a ban, and if for whatever reason none of the above happen, we'll have to go back and go through that process to get the moratorium extended. And of course, the continuing of the negotiations, I said as well. We're hoping to have both of these bills ready to go to the Legislative Review Bureau in January of 2024. And then we need to do the work required to pass both bills. So we need you to stay connected with us so that that together we can do the lobbying we need, and you feel comfortable going in and talking to your elected officials, and we make sure we're all working together to get the strongest bill possible passed. I'm done.
Great job, Pam. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions from the chat, and if you have others, please put them in there so that we can get them asked. The first one is a double question from Margaret Keelan. She asked first, is the speed of flow in real time for the whole rupture video? So what she's asking is that explosion in real time, or is it sped up, or what?
I'm not sure that I know that answer, but I'm sort of suspecting Paul might. And Paul, I don't know if you can put it in the chat, because it does say it's 8 times on the video, but I don't know. What I will tell you is, what I do know is that what you see as that visible plume is what happens when the gas erupts out of the, there he says real time, out of the CO2 pipeline, and then when it starts to dissipate, I think what was said in the video is true. It's because the gas is warming and you can't see it anymore, right? So so it's really violent at first. And the thing that we want to clarify here is, Paul says it's in real time, and 2, it's an 8-inch pipeline. So we're looking at pipelines of 20 inches and 16 inches in diameter here in Illinois. So it'll be more violent than that.
Okay. The other question is a little more to the legislation, and Margaret asks, is there any section dealing with having independent observers to monitor various aspects of the project, such as water contamination or leaks? And I share her lament that so often the companies themselves are the only ones monitoring very important aspects of the process.
I believe we've got third-party monitoring, third-party written into the bill. So yeah. Excellent. Yeah, that was something that actually that was something also brought up as we had our early discussions with Christian County folks, you know, so that's what they said they wanted to see, and I'm sure it's there.
Okay, great. From Avis Bernstein, she asked for a little bit of clarification about the byproducts of hydrogen and how that all fits into the pipeline world. So
I am not a hydrogen expert, and I know this is something that I need to be paying more attention to. And to be honest, there's so much to pay attention to, it's hard. But there are a variety of different types of hydrogen. Green hydrogen uses a system that involves renewable energy, and the way it functions and works is considered by the experts green. Hydrogen comes in a variety of colors, right? And the blue hydrogen, and then there's gray hydrogen, and there's pink hydrogen, and there's I don't know what. But depending on the source of what's used to make the hydrogen depends on what color it gets. So nuclear power, for example, is considered a low carbon fuel, so it gets a different color than, say, blue hydrogen, which is using a fossil fuel. And when that process takes place, as I said, the byproduct is it ends up with CO2 as a byproduct, and that will be captured, and it will be transported, and it will be stored. That is my understanding. So it's a dirtier form of hydrogen than other forms of hydrogen are. And how much will be used of each type here in Illinois, I don't know. I don't have a great understanding of how much renewable energy it would take and where that would come from, and how much land area it would cover to really do this. I think the whole hydrogen question is another thing we ought to be looking at as another potential scheme. And that's a different subject. And I think we're going to talk more about that. In fact, we've talked about hosting an expert on our Thursday night calls to specifically talk about hydrogen and bring us up to speed on what's happening here in Illinois now that we've been selected.
Great. Okay, we'll do one last question from Bobby Trist. She was wondering about EVs working during a leak and what some of the vehicular challenges are in a CO2 leak situation.
If I understand, why do we need EVs? Was that the question?
No, just that I answered that I think EVs work unqualified, but I just wondered if you had anything you wanted to say on that.
Well, I would say that there is always a challenge of making sure you have an electric vehicle that's charged up and ready to go, right? So the reason folks are talking about EVs are just because if you need to have somebody rescued and you can't use your internal combustion engine, then what is your option? Obviously, the best thing to do is to make sure you don't write the pipeline close enough to put people in a position where they have to be rescued. But that's why. And I don't know how many of us at home have electric vehicles. Not yet. I don't think we're there yet. So you'd have to be able to self-rescue as well. So
okay, and Mary asked the question on everyone's mind: why can't we just draft a bill that bans CCS and CO2 pipelines? And yeah, rhetorically, I'm all with you, Mary, but I think Pam will have a little different answer.
I would love to be able to do that. I think that those, and Lisa's on the call here, so perhaps she would like to weigh in this because she's a legislative piece. The numbers have been counted. They are not the votes. We have a Democratic assembly here who is a pretty, majority Democratic General Assembly here who are pretty keen on moving carbon capture, storage, and pipelines forward. And it's taken a yeoman's effort to try to get them to sit down with us and even talk to them about it. They're supporting it. And they're the majority here. So I don't think there's any hope for a ban for that reason. And if Lisa, you have any, or Tracy, your opinion, at this time, I don't think it can happen. There's too much money. People are looking at this as a way to make more money. And they look at this from an economic point of view. It's dollar signs that are just, in my view, driving the show here.
Yeah, we have a gentleman who put in the questions. I assume it's a gentleman. I don't know. Maybe it's not. D. Silverman. So we will leave that anonymous. Wanting to point out the importance of solidarity with the nuclear moratorium, which is in danger of being lifted this week or in the next weeks with the veto session Governor Pritzker had vetoed the lifting of the moratorium on nuclear. We'll see if that veto will hold or if they override it. It's all part of, I agree, it's all part of turning the tide towards actual renewables transitions. But this sort of treads into the area where I think, in terms of building a broad coalition, I would encourage us all to say that those issues are somewhat secondary in the way that we don't want to dig in too much on climate change. We don't want to dig into other solutions. We want to just focus on getting these pipelines turned back, and then do the best we can for Mother Earth in the ways that we see are best beyond that. So I want to leave some time for Ann Baskerville. Ann is the conservation organizer for the Chicago area with the Illinois Sierra Club. And Ann has given countless hours to the pipeline fight, and we appreciate her helping to host meetings, doing all kinds of research, and generally bringing the muscle of Sierra Club into this fight. That's been really important. Ann's going to share with us some ideas of a short action we all need to take.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, and thanks to everyone who has joined tonight. Really appreciate everyone's engagement in this really important issue for Illinois. So and Pam touched on the ICC a little bit. I'm going to talk about how everyone is, we would hope everyone would consider making a public comment on the Illinois Commerce Commission website. And as the subtitle here says, we have to get our arguments on the record. I think we heard from Pam many good arguments why the risks of CCS are so huge for people and for our environment and for our water resources in Illinois. So would really encourage everyone to consider doing this. And so the Illinois Commerce Commission, you can go to icc.illinois.gov. And I wanted to highlight here just some basic facts about the ICC, maybe to keep in the back of your mind while you're thinking about your comment. It's a quasi-judicial body made up of 5 commissioners responsible for regulating several industries as directed by our General Assembly. And as you can see here, the Bureau of Public Utilities oversees the provision of adequate, reliable, efficient, and safe utility services at the least possible cost to Illinois citizens served by electric, natural gas, telecommunications, water, and sewer public utilities. You may have noticed carbon dioxide was not listed. You may have noticed some keywords as safe, and I think that is what I would highlight here the most. And so I think we have, and other people have already made comments, but we've seen so much information about why these pipelines are unsafe and just pose such a huge risk to the general public. So I think that's a really important thing that we need to make sure the ICC hears. And I can report that in several of the staff recommendations for Navigator, they have said, we read the public comments and the public is raising these safety risks. These are valid concerns and they have to be listened to. So that is really encouraging that the staff is reading the comments. Okay, so submitting a comment, like I said, you go to icc.illinois.gov. And I believe we normally share all this info, so no need to write it down if you're not in a space to do that. You're going to look for the e-docket. And the e-docket for Wolf's Pipeline is 23-0475. So when you search by that docket number, and this kind of goes back to that the ICC is sort of a judicial process, you will see the case details for Wolf's application for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. And it will say who the administrative law judges are. It says the title of the case. And then over in the right-hand side, you see sort of a menu that I'm going to highlight in the next section. And so we were just looking at case details and overview. And then there's also a part for the schedule, So if there were a hearing, any sort of cross-examination, that would be on the schedule. I'm going to highlight documents and public comments. So documents are a listing of all the documents that have been filed by the parties that are participating in the case. And as you can see on this next page, there is a group in Illinois, Citizens Against Predatory Pipelines, that has joined together to make arguments at the Illinois Commerce Commission about why Wolf's application should be denied because it is unsafe and not in the best interest of the people of Illinois. And so if you go on the website, and I would really recommend the testimony that has been submitted is excellent. It provides great arguments. For example, there is testimony from a school that would be impacted by this, explaining why this project is unsafe. There is testimony by engineers, by public health, people with a background in public health. There is testimony from people that are involved in EMS and first response, describing how costly it would be for these rural EMS districts to invest in electric vehicles, and where would that money come from. So if you are interested in reading this testimony, it could provide some great arguments that you can make in a public comment. Not, you can totally make your public comment based on your own experience and your whatever is relevant to you and speaks to you. But this testimony does exist if you want to dig in and read what has been submitted. The next step would be, if you were to click on the public comments menu here, it will give you the public comment page. And as you can see, when I took this screenshot, there were 495 public comments submitted in total. And it just goes chronologically. So you can, this is another great way to get ideas and see what other people have submitted. You can read all of the comments that have been written already. And then you can also hit this button to file a comment. And then I've kind of touched on a little bit of this, but some things you might think about are safety. We saw the video with Pam. We heard about the possible risks to water. So I think it would be very relevant to say to the ICC, as you're making your decision as to whether or not this project is in the public interest of Illinois, how are you balancing the risks and the benefits that are being claimed? The company is making arguments about the benefits, but how are you weighing the risks and the costs? And again, the public benefit argument is really relevant to the eminent domain piece. And if you read through the public comments, there are many folks who outline how they will be impacted if their land, if they have an easement taken by eminent domain, how that will impact the remainder of their property and also their ability to live in their current home. So those are some ideas for things you could write public comments about. And then once you hit file a comment, it will again give you this section, the title of the case. You will enter your information and you can file a comment. One thing to note is you can file multiple comments. If you want to keep each comment on one topic, that's fine. If you want to make a larger comment with multiple topics, whatever you want, but know that you can file as many comments as you feel compelled to file. So that was kind of a really brief overview, but we do know that ICC staff are reading these public comments. So again, would just encourage anyone to consider making a comment. And I'll stop sharing.
Thanks for that, Anne. My colleague Joyce Morant points out that since all of our strong testimony to the ICC opposing this, the proponents of this pipeline have been beating the bushes, and there has been a ton of pro comments that have been dumped onto the docket. So I think it's really important to keep up the push for comments, and even if you've commented before, comment again. There's so many aspects of this thing. We could all put in a comment a day and we probably wouldn't hit all the things wrong with this application. So I appreciate that. Does anyone have any specific questions for Ann? I didn't see too much. I know Pam is going to be distributing a summary of the webinar along with some of the slides and the video recording. And since we've got a few extra minutes here, if I could get Lan to allow Dawn Dannenbring to speak, she'd like to make a pitch for anybody who's available to come and help out in McLean County. There she is. All right.
Thanks, Tracy. So One Earth did file with the Illinois Commerce Commission on the 18th. I think I put this in the chat, and they have already submitted to the McLean County Zoning Board of Appeals for a special use permit to allow sequestration in McLean County, and that hearing is this coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. We have not had much time to prepare for this. We've been fighting Navigator, which wants to sequester under the Mahomet Aquifer in McLean County, and we've known of that fight longer. But then this drops, and here they want to do it in the feeding waters. It's not over the aquifer, but in, as Pam said, a very dangerous area. So I think what would be really, really helpful is for our zoning board of appeals to see faces other than the usual IPA leaders that have been coming and testifying over and over. It would be wonderful if some of you on this call would share some of the information shared tonight. I am really, really hoping, Pam, that we have information on the leak at the ADM phase 1 plant by Tuesday night, because all of these companies have been talking about how safe it is. And they portray the cap rock as unpermeable, and they portray it as though it is one rock, and that, when it migrates upwards, it will hit that and just stop, not that it will move laterally, and then when it hits the end of the capstone, still migrate upwards and then pollute or release the CO2. So the hearing is at 7 o'clock, and I would ask anyone that does come, because we have been impugned by the board at some of the previous things. We are on our best behavior, actually not treated so well by them, but that you be very professional. We were given 10 minutes at the last 2 hearings for testimony. I don't know that you'll have that long at the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing. So what we had originally asked our leaders to do is to prepare a short version and a long version so that you are not trying to revise on the spot, and that as I'm sure you're all aware and have done many times before, that you practice it ahead of time, know how you're going to start, know how you're going to end. They took signups at the door of the last 2 hearings, but the last 2 hearings were on an ordinance rather than an actual special use permit. So I'm trying to remember the last time that we intervened in a special use permit, and it was on fracking in 2014. We won that after 5 consecutive nights and 29.5 hours of testimony. And that just shows me that if we are dogged enough and that we have enough people, that we can win this. So, and we did reach out to the county attorney says that they can't do anything about it, that they are forced to give a permit if the EPA gives a class 6 well, that they can't go any stricter than that. EPA has told us something different. And Tracy, since you and I made the call this afternoon, Matthew has reached back and he suggests that the county lawyer talk to their lawyers, and he thinks that that is the best course of action, but I doubt we get that to happen before Tuesday. So I'll take any questions on that, but just would really, really love if you could come, and we'll be putting up, in fact, I think Don has already put a post on the Facebook page. And if you could reach out to us and just let us know, we would love to fill that room. It's room 400 and it holds about 70 people comfortably. And man, it would be great to be, for them to have to bring in more chairs.
Thanks for that, Dawn. And McLean County is one of the few places where if you show up, they will continue to hold meetings until they hear from you. And so it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It really puts the burden on groups like IPA to do repeated turnout. So hopefully some of us can get over there and help them out. I think that's pretty much everything, and we are at 8:28. So I want to give a big thanks to Lisa, to Pam, and to Anne for preparing the materials and being with us. And I want to thank all of you for being part of the pipeline fight, part of the coalition to stop CO2 pipelines, and everything that you're doing to fight these monsters. Have a great evening.